Hey, welcome, Echo family. What a great day to be together. Before we jump in our topic, I want to celebrate last Sunday with you because we asked you to invite friends and neighbors and co-workers to our annual block party, and you did. In fact, we broke bathrooms, we violated codes and all this kind of stuff, but it was our record attendance. 3,500 plus people were at Echo.Church last Sunday. Proud of you for inviting your friends. And my favorite thing about last Sunday was not just all the fun that we had and the great food, but there was a moment where we called people that were here to surrender their lives to Jesus and to say, Jesus, I haven't made you my Savior, my Lord, my Master yet, but this is your moment. And we asked them to raise their hand, and 271 people committed to follow Jesus last Sunday. Isn't that amazing? Proud of you. Thank you for inviting your friends and including others in the journey of faith. This is why we do what we do as a church. God's moving because of you, because of your faithfulness in that. And in fact, this series we're kicking off today is more about that. It is a call for us to see the places where we live and work and play as places where we get to influence, where God is able to use us not only when we gather on Sunday, but when we go throughout the week in our schools and our places of work. And what does it look like for us to say, God, use my work, use my talents, use my influence for doing good in the city? And I can't wait to unpack it. This begins a new journey for us. We're going to go through this journey for 5 weeks. And throughout these few weeks, by the way, we're giving everybody an opportunity to join what we call table groups. Now, table groups, if you're new here at Echo, this is what historically we've called Echo groups. We relabeled it for this fall because we're asking you to jump into a community, to a small group community that literally meets on a weekly basis around a meal or a drink, a table, just to get to know each other and talk about the things of God. And we all do this here at Echo every single semester, but this time we're in a journey called Explore God. There's actually 200 plus churches doing the same teaching series that we are going to do starting in September. And as we begin that teaching series, Explore God, we're going to not only meet on Sundays, but meet around these tables all throughout the community. So if you're not yet in a table group, if you didn't sign up for one, we're going to give you a chance to do that today. We don't want you to miss out because they fill up. There's hundreds of them, but we want to make sure you find the one that's just right for you. So I hope you're excited about that. But today, we're going to talk about a topic that we've addressed before. In fact, the text we've addressed before, but I want to give you a different angle of it. And I should take you back to my junior year of high school before we get started. So my junior year is a year that my life was changed. And if you've been here, you've kind of heard my story before, but I was at the bottom of the pit during my sophomore year of school, and I had a life-changing encounter with God that forever changed me. Throughout my junior year, I was growing in my faith, and I was invited to participate in a mission trip. So if you're new to church, a mission trip is a trip where people of faith will take often internationally to go serve a local partner or church around the world, and usually areas of bigger need. And we spend like 7 days or 2 weeks sometimes, literally every day loving people, serving people, sharing the love of Jesus to whatever people group we're there to serve. And that's what I went to do. It was a group of teenagers. We all went together to a place to just serve God every day for 7 days. Throughout that experience, something shifted in me. In fact, every day we would wake up and there was only one purpose in our day, which was help people get closer to God. And so we were in a camp environment and, serving the city and all this stuff. But every day we would do this. And by the end of the week, I remember my heart was like exploding. I thought, man, I've just experienced something that I know I'm created to do. Have you had that moment? You're doing something, you're like, there's something about this moment that reveals to me a little bit more of what I'm wired to do. And I knew that this had to do with my future. In fact, I didn't know my whole career at that point. And when you're a junior in high school, they pressure you, like, what's going to be your major? What are you going to study? And some of your students are in that place right now. You're trying to figure that out. I didn't know if I was going to be a firefighter or a teacher or whatever else. But I knew this. Whatever it is that I would do with my life, I wanted it to be about the thing that I knew in this moment of my life that mattered most to God. which is people. It had to do with people. And I committed my life that week to say, God, use me. Use my life to change other people's lives, because now I know that people are at the center of your heart. I didn't even know I was going to be a pastor someday. I was like, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, I want it to be about that. But you know what's crazy? Even when you devote yourself to this, it's so easy to get distracted. Like you start something with a dream of like, okay, I'm going to start this career and I'm going to change people's lives and I'm going to create products that benefit people and change the world. But then before you know it, the profit became priority over the people, and the product became priority over the souls of the people in your team. And all of the things that we say we're about just gets kind of pushed to the side. Maybe you even had that moment where you're like, God, if you just give me like that pretty girl, I'll commit my life to you. Or like, hey, if I get that house or that job or that car, I promise, like I will use it to do good in people's lives around me. And then like you did for a couple days, and then it became all about you again, right? This is like the human struggle. We find ourselves in this place where we want to make a difference, but then the places that we live and we work and whatever else that we went to make a difference end up becoming a bother to us. And we start looking at problems no longer as opportunities to change a life, but as things to run from or to get upset about. And Jesus had a way of looking at life very different than this. He looked at problems and at brokenness with an eye that was so different than the average person. But this is what he calls us to. And I want to give you a call today. I want to call you to see people differently today. We're going to dive into a text that is so important to us here in our culture at Echo. I addressed it a couple months ago, but I want to give you a different angle today. It's in Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. If you have your Bible, you want to open it there, or your digital notes through the digital program today, or it'll be on the screens as well. But it goes like this. Jesus was traveling throughout the towns and the villages of the area. And he was teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom of God. So he'd go from town to town telling people there's good news for you. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And then he said to his disciples, the harvest is great. In other words, there's a lot of problems, there's a lot of brokenness, a lot of opportunities, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest and ask him to send more workers into the field. If you can picture this with me, a lot of the times in other eyewitness accounts, it says that Jesus was over a hill looking down at the cities and towns. And maybe if you're in Fremont, you're like at Mission Peak and you're looking over the Bay Area, or in San Jose, you're at like Mount Hamilton and you're looking over the Bay Area, or if you're in our Sunnyvale campus, it's like picture being on top of one of the tech giants out there and looking over the bay. And Jesus is having this moment with his followers, his disciples or apprentices. And as he's looking over the crowds, he's seeing brokenness. It's not just the pretty trees and whatever else. He's like, there's people here that are greedy. There are people here that are in injustices. There's some slavery. There's some poverty. There's homelessness. There is all kinds of trash perhaps around. But it says that his heart was not just bothered by the reality. He was moved with compassion. I wonder what's the dominating emotion for you. Because when I look at problems, when I look at things that are not right or not ideal, oftentimes I'm just angry. Like I'm disappointed, I'm angry, I'm bothered by it, and I want to kind of walk away from the problem, but Jesus seemed to have a different approach. In fact, there's 3 common responses to brokenness. I wonder which one you most identify with. Number 1 is this, it's contempt. It's when you look at a problem, a place, or a person, and you have an attitude of superiority, disgust, and anger toward them. So you're like, I hate the fact that there's so many homeless here. I hate that there's like trash, or there's so much greed, and whatever else you see in your schools and your workplaces. You're like, man, it's disgusting. It's like, I don't want to be near that. You have contempt in your heart. The second response is compassion. Now, compassion is when you have a deep sense of empathy for the suffering of others, but it's accompanied by a desire to help. It's not just pity. It's not just like, I feel bad for you. It's like I see something that's not the way it should be, and I must do something about it. But then the third alternative, perhaps, is the one that we most find ourselves in. And it's this idea of being complacent. You're like, I'm not angry, and I'm not moved with compassion, but I don't really care. It's being satisfied or comfortable with the situation, even if it's not ideal. So you look at the brokenness of the area, or of your school, or of your workplace, or of the workout gym that you're at, and you're like, you know what? It's not my problem. Like, so what? Marriages are falling apart and people are isolated and they're disconnected from each other. It's not my thing. I'll just sit around. See, compassion, it moves you towards solutions for others. That's how Jesus saw things. But complacency, it makes you sit still and do nothing about it. It's not your problem. And contempt makes you actually want to pull back away from others, because you're saying, I don't want you to cause me discomfort. This is actually why so many people have moved away from the Bay Area in the last few years. Because they started to say this, you know what, I know this is a beautiful place, there's all kinds of good stuff, but there are easier places to live. And there's a brokenness, perhaps, that I don't want to be a part of, so let me go to a place that's more comfortable for me. Let me go to a place where there's more people like me. Even people of faith have done this. Well, there's so much progressive thinking here, and there's so counter the Word of God. I need to go to Texas. Sorry, Texas. South Carolina, whatever it is. Well, you guys are all here, so you're not that crowd. You stayed. Proud of you, by the way. I'm glad you stayed here in the Bay Area. But imagine this with me. We have a compassion team at Echo. Imagine if our compassion team existed all for the sake of contempt. We're like, hey, we're going to get together, and if I sign up Echo.Church, because we're going to identify all the problems of the city, and then we're going to get angry together at it. We're going to just be disgusted by it. Man, look at how many homeless people. Look at how many lonely people. Whoa, that sucks. Stinks, maybe that's a better word. Unpreferable, I don't know, whatever the word you want. Imagine they existed maybe for complacency. Hey, we're going to identify all the stuff that's wrong in our schools, and then we're going to sit around and just do nothing together. Can you sign up for that? Join my team? It sounds funny to say, but in reality, that's how a lot of us live. We're in one of those extremes because it's hard to feel compassionate for something that you don't think you have anything to do with. See, Jesus felt compassion because he saw that area, that region, as his area and his region. But here's the crazy thing. It wasn't. It wasn't his hometown. He didn't know the people. That he was looking at the crowds. But he knew this one thing that I hope you hear today. That if God placed me here, it must be because he has an assignment for me here. It's not so I can sit around and complain about it. It's not so that I can, dream about the day that I move out of this place. It's so that I see where I live and I work out as my mission field, as the place where I bring light and change, where the brokenness moves me to action. It wasn't because they deserved it, by the way. They were broken like all of us. The people in his day were evil like all of us, doing stuff that undeserving of the grace of God, yet Jesus was moved with a deep sense of compassion. Now, this word compassion sometimes gets interpreted, differently in different languages, but in the original context, they wrote it in the Greek language, and in the Greek language, this word literally is called splachnos. Sorry, I just spit in the front row. But I'm telling you this because the meaning has a lot to do with the sound of that word, splachnos. It's like gut or kidney or bowels. Is when you feel something so deeply inside of you that it moves you in the gut area. So Jesus is looking at the crowd and he's like, there's so much brokenness here. And there's so many things that are wrong with these places and these towns where we currently live. But it's not for us to get angry at or to sit around and do nothing. I'm feeling it at a gut level. In other words, it was not just a casual thing for Jesus. It was a big deal for him. He saw beneath the symptoms of humanity. He knew the real struggle was that people were disconnected from their Creator. He knew that behind all the brokenness in marriages and all the selfishness of people and all of the greed and all the injustice and all of the racism and all of that stuff that was happening, behind it all was this little thing called sin. And when that would be solved, people could get to know their Creator and be transformed by Him. He understands the human weakness. But then he said this little phrase. He says, the problem can be solved with a couple of things. He says this. He had compassion on them. They were confused and helpless, like sheep that don't have a shepherd. It's a weird phrase. Like, we don't have a lot of sheep and shepherds in the Bay Area, so it's hard for us to understand the context. Like, how did they hear those words? And I want you to know it's not quite like how we hear it today. That expression was very familiar in their day. It was an expression of their day. And when they heard it, they heard two different things primarily, like two metaphors that it represented. One of them is what you might think of. It's a loving guide. Like, when we think of the shepherd, we think of like the guy that's like skinny with the staff, and there's like really cute sheep around him, and he's like really loving, and when the sheep is hurt, he's like, come on over, and it's like he just kind of stands there. He's probably very bored because you're just like looking at all the sheep in the field, and like, what do I do all day? And maybe they didn't have phones, so they're just like staring out, and there is some of that that's connected to being a shepherd. And in fact, like, there's a psalm that's really famous. Even if you're new to church or kind of exploring faith, you might have heard this. It's Psalm 23. That's like, the Lord is my shepherd. But you know what? Before I read this psalm, I feel like we need to set the mood for this psalm. So I want a production crew, can you help us out? Can you give us like some soft playing music behind all of this? So to set the atmosphere. There you go. Can you feel that? That's a little sleepy, actually. Could you do something like a harp, maybe? So I can read the psalm with it? That's better. All right. So if you can picture the shepherd walking down the field. I feel like we need a field. Production crew, could you give me like just a field, like green pastures behind me, perhaps? Just kind of help us visualize. A lot of us are visual learners, right? So if you can just help me out here for a second. Do like something really beautiful. Okay. This feels right now for the text. Something's still missing. Don't you think that adding some sheep would really make it happen right here? Could you guys figure that out? Could you add some sheep to the green pastures for me for just a minute? See if you can just like pop, maybe they can just move a little bit. There you go. I like beautiful, beautiful sheep. I think we're, actually, maybe one more thing. I really love baby sheep. Can you hook us up with some like little baby sheep around before I read the text? Just kind of like a couple of them, like really cute baby sheep. There you go. All right, get yourselves now in the mood with me. You ready? Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down. Sorry, it's hard to be serious. I'm going to try. He makes me lie down in green pastures, and He leads me beside quiet waters. Can you feel it? Thank you, production crew, for that. See, we read these things, And we're like, well, that must be the image of shepherds, right? It's like serenity and calmness. And it is. It is a part of who God is. He's a God that comes and he is a guide and he's loving and he's caring and he invites us into a relationship with him that is like being in green pastures. Like we find life in him. But that's not all that they heard when they heard shepherd. In fact, all throughout the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, there were references to this little phrase that Jesus says, sheep without a shepherd. And there are historical accounts that show us in archaeological even evidence that they didn't just see shepherds as people that were loving guides, but also as warrior leaders. And in fact, Jesus in this moment is quoting an ancient phrase, an ancient prayer that Moses had prayed 1,500 years prior. He's in a moment where he is literally on top of a mountain as well, and he is looking over what's called the promised land, and he's supposed to be taking people there, but God revealed to him, you're not the one that can take them into that land. In fact, Moses, you're about to die. And so Moses feels splachnos. He's like, somebody needs to lead them into the presence of God, into the place that he promised we could be in someday. So then he prays his prayer. He says, "Oh Lord, you are the God who gives breath to all creatures. Please appoint a new man as a leader for the community. Give them someone who will guide them." Can you say guide them? Guide them. Pay attention to that. Who guide them wherever they go and will lead them. Can you say lead them? Lead them into battle. So the community of the Lord will not be like sheep without a shepherd. See, Jesus is bringing them back to a phrase they had heard before when Moses was on top of the hill. And he was looking over a place that was not yet ideal, a community of people not yet in the will of God. And he knew, I'm going to end my journey here, but somebody else must continue this journey. And what they need to be like is two things. See, what the world needs, what Jesus is saying is you need to be two things. We need people that will be loving guides that takes others to places of life. That's what a shepherd does. But also, we need people that will become warrior leaders. Those that will fight for justice. People that know it's not just about pointing at darkness, it's about becoming light in darkness. It's not just us saying, there's a lot of problems in our city, but it's people that say, no, I will fight to bring justice into my city. It's people that see the individual around them in their schools and their workplaces, and they're like, I'm not just going to be annoyed at your brokenness. I will love you into a relationship with God. But it's also people that will not settle for things not being the way that God wants them to be, and they try to do something about it. There are many instances in the scriptures and in historical accounts about this. In fact, this image of the shepherd as a warrior leader is in history as well. And one of my favorite archaeological finds of all time, it's of King Tut's royal tomb. I'm going to show you a picture of this. You might remember studying this in school. He was a real person. He ruled over Egypt in the 1300s BC. And his tomb was discovered in 1922. And I want you to know, or to notice, the shepherd's crook over his tomb. See, King Tut was known as a victorious conqueror, one who fought for things, and he wanted to be buried. They buried him with the metaphor, the illustration, the symbol of a shepherd's crook, because a shepherd is not just one who guides you into loving, safe places, but one who fights for your justice. Jesus used this to show us that the world needs more people that will be loving guides that take you to life and warrior leaders that fight for your good. And that's exactly what he did. He came as a loving guide. So he healed the sick. He loved the unlovable. He did all of that. But then he also saw injustice, and he says, I must do something about it. He modeled for us this reality that if God placed me here, it must be for a reason. So he didn't just say it's okay that there's injustice. In fact, the ultimate injustice to him was caused by this thing called sin. And so what a warrior leader does is they sacrifice themselves so that others can find life. So Jesus then took the sin that had its consequence on us and put it on himself. And the death that we deserve, he died with on a cross so that he can be the warrior leader that conquered sin and death for the sake of humanity's relationship with the Father. Because that's what a loving guide and a warrior leader does. But the thing that's most shocking about all of this is what comes next. Because he didn't just say, this is what I came to do. In fact, right after he says the world needs this, a shepherd that is loving and that is caring and whatever else, and that's a warrior leader, he then says the harvest is great. Like, yeah, there's a lot of problems, but the workers are few. There's not enough people for this. So he said, pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest and ask him to send more workers into his field. Notice what he did not say. He didn't say, all right, apprentices, check it out. There's a huge harvest and a lot of problem, so my moment is here and I'm going to solve it all so you don't have to do anything. Like, this is it. Like, I will take care of all of it myself. Instead, I think he surprised them. I think they were waiting for him to maybe do that. But then he's like, hey, guess what? Tag, you're it. You are the ones that will go. Just as Moses on top of the hill said, God, bring up a new leader that will take this mission that I began and bring people to my will, to the will of God. Jesus then says, hey, I am now at the end of my life, and I'm calling you to be the workers of the great harvest. So we need people that will look at their regions with a sense of calling and splachnos, where they break over the brokenness of the region, and they're not just mad at it and move away to different places, but they know if God placed me here, it's because there's something I have this world needs. There's something inside of me that he wants to leverage to change those around me. In essence, he's calling us to that assignment that he began. I wonder if you have responded to that calling. Even if you're here exploring faith and you're not even sure where you fit into this picture, I want you to know the reason you're on this earth has a lot to do with the thing that is at the center of the heart of God, which is people. He wants to use our lives to change those around us. He's looking for people that take ownership over the region where they live, to be those that see obstacles and problems not as things to complain about, but as a harvest to bring hope into. People that don't just say, look at all the things that are going wrong, but those that know I must be here for such a time as this, for this purpose. Those that don't just get mad and annoyed at what's happening in schools and in our region and in the brokenness, but that really break with compassion. Say, God, would you use my life for this? I love this verse in Romans that says, it's Romans 12, do not let evil conquer you, but instead run to places of safety. I don't know if it's on the screen, but it's not what it says, is it? Do not let evil conquer you. Instead, just complain about it. Instead, just run to places where there's no evil, where there's a lot more people that do good. It's not what it says, is it? Do not let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. That's what splachnos does. We see the evil in our generation and in our places, and we don't run. We have the power of the living God living inside of us for a reason. There's a reason he calls us to dark places. It's not so that we can leave the dark places and go to places where there's already light. We're here, you're here, all of us are here because we live in the most influential metropolitan area on earth, yet it is the most unchurched, unreached place on the North American continent. And there needs to be more people that wake up every morning thinking, I must be called here for a reason. I must have been placed in this neighborhood, in this house, in this school, in this workplace, because God must love the people here so much that he assigned me to this area. That's the calling that Jesus gives us. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with the mayor of San Jose. And I got to show him, we gave him a tour of our Compassion Center. We talked about how we as a church can be more involved in a community and so forth. It was a great interview. You should watch it on YouTube. But there's one portion I want to show you today. It's when I asked him, what do you think, Mayor, is the main thing that faith communities ought to do more in their city? Love for you to check out his answer. From your point of view, what should we do more of? And if you could have a few minutes to just speak into the Echo community and call us to a different level of engagement toward the city, what's your word for us?
Wow, that's no pressure.
No pressure.
That's a good one. Yeah. Well, first let me say I really appreciate that you're talking about acts, not just words.
Yeah.
And that faith needs to be expressed through action and through serving others. I think that's very powerful, and I do think there's been this sort of retreat from society at times. So I think that's really powerful, and I'm glad that you're thinking about it that way. One thing I would say that may sound almost too obvious is that I'm really trying to encourage everyone in San Jose to get out and meet their neighbors.
Love
that I know sounds obvious and maybe when you actually think about doing it in practice a little odd. Are you really going to just go knock on your neighbor's door? But yes, I mean, I think you can get to know your neighbors and reach out. There's a woman on my cul-de-sac named Cindy. I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but she has some training in emergency preparedness and she's sort of like the mayor of our cul-de-sac. She knows everyone on the street. She has everyone's contact information. Whenever a new person moves in, she throws a little potluck and invites all the neighbors. She knows, if there was an emergency, she'd be the one who would, if we had an earthquake, she'd be out there saying, okay, that house has, 2 kids and 3 cats. Let's make sure they're all safe, and she knows what to do. And she has taken it upon herself to be the connector in our neighborhood. And I think that we've become very isolated. And I think thankfully our faith communities are still a source of connection and belonging and are a counter trend. But maybe you can share that sense of community and connection with others who may not be people of faith, who may have a different faith tradition, who may be agnostic or atheist or whatever it might be. We have lost that sense of community in our neighborhoods, and we know the research is very clear that we know we're facing an epidemic of loneliness in this country. People feel isolated, they often feel very fearful, and the opposite is also true. When we make that very uncomfortable effort to get out and get to know our neighbors and ask how we can help each other, it could be as easy as starting with an emergency preparedness list. That's a good excuse for getting to know all your neighbors, is compiling everybody's phone numbers in case of an emergency and making sure everybody knows what to do if an earthquake hits. Could be a good excuse. But we know that when neighborhoods are connected and people are on a first name basis with their neighbors, we actually get better outcomes. Neighborhoods are suddenly, almost magically, they're safer, people are healthier, or happier. You actually get better human outcomes when people are connected. And so yes, serve at the soup kitchen and help us with housing the homeless and then all these other great programs. But I think what we most lack is at the fundamental level is that sense of human connection and trust, and maybe the operative word here is love. I know that's really uncomfortable. We don't really talk about that in public policy so much, but fundamentally, I think we all yearn for more of that. So I think everybody here has an opportunity to go be that force of love and connection right there, starting with the person who lives right next door to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well said. I think that's a great call for our church.
Can we thank our mayor here? You know, I thought that when we asked him what should we do more of, that he would say, oh, please come, like, get houses for the homeless and pick up trash in our city. But the thing that he said is so true, is that the greatest pandemic that we face now is the pandemic of isolation and loneliness. And there are people all around us and many of us struggling with that very thing. And when we think about people being people that are loving guides that take others to life and warrior leaders that fight for justice, perhaps this is the most practical step we can take, is becoming people of love. People that take the first step to other students that are isolated in your class, and co-workers that are angry and bitter, but that you know they're experiencing that because they haven't yet met their Creator. And people in the neighborhood that just don't know anybody, and they just need a human connection. We need to be a body that knows how to drop devices at times, look each other in the eye, and like the mayor of San Jose said, teach culture again what it looks like to just love each other, to know those that live and work around you. One of the most practical steps you can take to just start this journey is to join one of our table groups this fall. That's why we're doing this with 200 other churches. It's because we know the Bay Area needs community again. And we don't want to keep something just for us that has changed us. We want to actually include others in that journey. So whether you're exploring faith or you're deepening your faith in Jesus, I want to ask you, even as one of your pastors, to take a bold step this fall and jump into these communities. There's hundreds of them right now being launched around the Bay Area. They're called table groups. And they're so important. I actually want to show you right now how to find one for you. And in fact, we often say drop the phone in church, but we're actually wanting to pick you up your phone right now in church. And I'm going to put a QR code on the screen. And even you don't have to do it immediately at all the way today, but I want to show you how to start. So if you scan that QR code on the screens at whatever campus or location or room you're in at Echo or Church Online as well, you're going to go to our digital program. And when you go to the digital program, just click on Join a Table Group. It'll open our group finder. And the first view is the map view. You can type in there your zip code, your address, and it shows you table groups around where you live. Or you can click on the list view and just search by category, day of the week, demographic group, category, whatever fits who you are. And then when you find a group that might work for you, or even two of them if that's the case, just click on it. It'll give you a chance to put your name and your email and your phone number. And that leader, that host that has volunteered to open their house, some of these meet in picnic tables, some of them meet in workplaces or on Zoom even. But whatever it is that you join, when you send that note, the leader will send you more information, and it'll start you on the journey of connecting with other humans. If you are already in a group, as we give everybody 90 seconds to find their group, I want to ask you to get your group on your device and just start inviting some people that are disconnected, maybe even from our faith community, to join your group. I'm asking all the bands of all of our locations to play for about 90 seconds so you have a chance to browse through a little bit and just begin the process of finding community through these table groups. Go for it.